Welcome to the COBOL-IT Learning Center. Getting started using Debug Attach in the COBOL-IT Developer Studio on Linux. In this module, we will show how to attach the COBOL-IT Debugger to a running process in the Developer Studio on Linux. We will run our sample application from a shell script, and pause the application with a call to the $debug library routine. We will then attach the COBOL-IT Debugger to the running process in the Developer Studio. After these exercises, you will understand how to use Debug Attach functions to attach the COBOL-IT Debugger to a running process in the Developer Studio. In our exercises, we are using COBOL-IT sample programs. All COBOL-IT sample programs are included in the COBOL-IT distribution. Let's get started. Prerequisites. For these exercises, the COBOL-IT compiler suite and Developer Studio must be installed on your Linux machine. Since the COBOL-IT compiler suite uses the host C compiler, you are also required to have the C compiler GCC installed. The Developer Studio requires that Eclipse be installed as well. For guidance, see the COBOL-IT e-learning modules, Installing COBOL-IT Compiler Suite Enterprise Edition on Linux, Installing COBOL-IT Developer Studio on Linux and getting started with the COBOL-IT Developer Studio. We will begin with a review of some key concepts. Key concepts. Debug Attach functionality allows you to attach the COBOL-IT Debugger to a running process. With this functionality, you can debug a COBOL program in an application in which the main program is not a COBOL program. For example, when you need to debug a COBOL program called from a transaction monitor such as Oracle Tuxedo or IBM TX series. Additionally, you can use Debug Attach when the main program in your application is a COBOL program that has not been started in the COBOL-IT Debugger. To attach the COBOL-IT Debugger to a running process, you must first pause the running process. Let's quickly review what you need to do to pause a program. Then, we can review how the paused program can be resumed in the debugger. Using call $debug to pause the runtime. The call $debug statement pauses the runtime and assigns a debug ID which can either be the process ID of the running process, or a user-assigned numeric ID. Using Debug Attach functionality within the Developer Studio, the paused process is identifiable by its debug ID and the user can attach the debugger to the process. In these exercises, we have two COBOL programs, named debugid.cbl and subpgm.cbl. Debug ID calls subpgm. These programs are compiled for debug, and are being run from a shell script. Let's take a closer look at our sample subpgm.cbl. This is subpgm.cbl. This program gets the process ID of the runtime session with a call to the $PID library routine. Then it calls the $debug library routine using the process ID. This suspends the application. We will attach our debugger to this suspended application in the Developer Studio. Now, let's take a look at our shell script. In our shell script, we compile the two source files. The programs are compiled with the -G compiler flag. This adds debugging information to the compiled objects. We are using the -O compiler flag to generate our compiled objects in a subdirectory called object. As a result, we require that the cob_library_path environment variable be set. The script launches Debug ID, which calls subpgm. As we have seen, subpgm will pause when it calls the $debug library routine. Let's run our script now, and proceed with the exercise. We have launched our shell script. Our application is now paused. We can now switch to the Developer Studio. This is the Developer Studio. Before we perform our exercises, let's quickly review our window preferences settings. Select the window function on the main menu bar, and then select Preferences from the drop-down menu. From the Preferences screen, click on Run Debug to expand the options. In the Run Debug Options, select Perspectives. On the Perspectives screen, under the title open the associated perspective when launching, select Always. This will cause the Debug Attach function to open directly in the debugger perspective. Click Apply to accept your changes. Click OK to return to the Developer Studio. Now, we must create a new COBOL project. To open the new project wizard, select File from the main menu bar. Then, select New from the drop-down menu, and Project from the subsequent drop-down menu. Expand the COBOL option, and select COBOL Project. Click the Next button at the bottom of the dialog screen to continue. On the screen titled Create a COBOL Project, you must enter the project name for your COBOL project. We will name our project Project 1. This causes a folder called Project 1 to be created under the Workspace folder. Click the Finish button to create Project 1. You will see that Project 1 has been added to your Navigator window. Now that we have a project, we can attach the debugger to the running process using the Debug Attach function. The Debug Attach function. In the Navigator window, right-click on the project. Select COBOL from the drop-down list, and then select Debug Attach from the subsequent drop-down. This opens the debug configuration for Reverse Attach. In the Debug configuration for Reverse Attach window, select the entry with the PID that matches the PID of the paused runtime session. Click Debug. This will cause us to enter the debugger perspective. The Developer Studio opens in the debugger perspective. We can see that sub-PGM is paused on line 13. Note that there is a message, in red, that reads Source Not Found. We must associate the source code of sub-PGM with the project. To associate the source code of sub-PGM with the project, click on the Edit Source Lookup Path button. This will open the Edit Source Lookup Path screen. On the Edit Source Lookup Path screen, the default setting is your current project path. If your source files are not in your project path, click the Add button. This will open the Add Source window, and we will use that interface to locate our source code. On the Add Source screen, select File System Directory, click OK. On the Add File System Directory screen, use the Browse button to locate your source files. The directory is pre-filled. Click OK to continue. Your selection has been added to the Source Lookup Path window. Click OK. You can now see sub-PGM animated in the Program View window. The program is paused, and the first line of execution is indicated by an arrow. The first line of execution is the line after the call $debug statement. You are now ready to debug in the Developer Studio. Use the Step into Debugger toolbar button to step through the program. As you step through the program, your display window is updated. The sub-PGM program exits and returns to the Debug ID program. Let's take one more look at the debugger perspective. The program has returned control to Debug ID. The debugger has located the source for Debug ID and allows you to continue to step through that program. When you arrive at the Stop Run statement, terminate the debugger by clicking on the Terminate button. Let's proceed to the summary now. In this module, We compiled and ran a sample application from a shell script. The sample application paused after executing a call to the C$debug library routine. We used the Developer Studio to attach the COBOL-IT Debugger to the running process. Then, we stepped through the source code in the debugger. For more detailed information, and the very latest reference documentation, please visit the doc folder under your COBOL-IT home directory. We encourage you to continue using the COBOL-IT online training program. Thank you.